The thunder of hoofbeats echoed across the vast Wyoming prairie as Sarah Vance clutched her 6-month-old daughter tighter against her chest, her heart pounding with the same desperate rhythm. It was 1878, and the young widow had just buried her husband 3 weeks ago, leaving her alone with little Emma and a claim that powerful men wanted. The dust kicked up behind her as she urged her tired mare forward, knowing that the riders pursuing her were gaining ground with each passing moment. The town of Whispering Pines had once been her safe haven, but since Thomas's death, it had become a place of whispers and threats. The Caldwell Mining Company had made it clear they wanted her land, believing there was silver beneath the rocky soil of her modest homestead. When she refused their pittance of an offer, the threats began. "Faster, Pearl, please," Sarah whispered to her mare, the fear evident in her voice as she glanced back at the approaching riders. Her long brown hair had come loose from its pins, whipping around her face as she rode. Emma whimpered against her chest, disturbed by the jarring ride and her mother's fear. Sarah had never imagined life would turn out this way. At 23, she should have been looking forward to raising her family alongside her husband, not fleeing for her life with a baby in her arms. But Thomas's death had changed everything. The fever had taken him quickly, leaving her to face the harsh frontier alone. The riders were close now, close enough that she could hear their shouts. Pearl was tiring, her pace slowing despite Sarah's desperate pleas. Ahead, the terrain changed, a small copse of trees offering the only shelter in sight. With no other option, Sarah directed her exhausted horse toward it, praying for a miracle. "Stop right there, Mrs. Vance." The voice behind her belonged to Howard Caldwell himself, the mining magnate who'd been pressuring her to sell. "There's nowhere to run," Pearl stumbled as they entered the trees, and Sarah barely managed to keep her seat while protecting Emma. The mare came to a halt, sides heaving, foam flecking her neck. Sarah slid from the saddle, keeping her baby close, and took cover behind a large oak. The 3 men on horseback slowed as they approached the trees. Howard Caldwell, a corpulent man with a thick mustache and expensive suit, dismounted with surprising agility for a man of his size. The other 2 men, hired guns by the look of them, remained on their horses, rifles at the ready. "Mrs. Vance," Caldwell called, his voice deceptively pleasant. "This foolishness has gone on long enough. You can't run a homestead alone with a baby. Be reasonable." Sarah remained silent, rocking Emma gently to keep her quiet. Her mind raced, searching for a way out. The trees provided temporary cover, but they couldn't stay there forever. "We know you're in there," Caldwell continued, his tone hardening. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." One of the gunmen dismounted and began to move toward her hiding place. Sarah pressed her back against the tree, her breath shallow. Emma, sensing her mother's fear, began to cry. The sound gave away their position immediately. The gunman changed direction, heading straight for them. "Found her, Mr. Caldwell," he called out, his weathered face breaking into a yellowed grin as he spotted Sarah and the baby. Sarah turned to run deeper into the trees, but the second gunman had already circled around, cutting off her escape. She was trapped. "Hand over the deed, Mrs. Vance," Caldwell said, approaching slowly. "We know you carry it with you. Give us the paper and you can be on your way." "This land is all I have left," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "It's Emma's inheritance." Caldwell sighed dramatically. "You women never understand business. There's silver on that land and the territory needs it. Progress doesn't wait for sentimentality. My husband died for that land. I won't dishonor his memory by giving it away." The first gunman moved closer, his hand reaching for his pistol. "Mr. Caldwell doesn't have all day, madam. The deed now." Sarah backed away until she felt the rough bark of another tree against her back. Emma's cries grew louder, her tiny face red with distress. "Perhaps we should take the child," Caldwell suggested, his voice ice cold. "A woman alone can't properly care for an infant. The orphanage in Cheyenne would take her in. You could visit, if you signed the deed over, of course." "You wouldn't dare," Sarah whispered, her blood turning to ice at the threat. Caldwell nodded to his men. "Take the baby. Mrs. Vance needs to understand how serious we are." The first gunman lunged forward, his dirty hands reaching for Emma. Sarah twisted away, shielding her daughter with her body, but the second man grabbed her from behind. She screamed, kicking and fighting as they tried to wrench her child from her arms. "No, she's my baby, please," Sarah begged, tears streaming down her face as she clung desperately to Emma. The crack of a gunshot split the air, followed by the puff of dust that erupted at Caldwell's feet. The men froze, their heads whipping toward the source of the shot. At the edge of the trees sat a lone horseman on a powerful black stallion. The cowboy's face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat brim, but the rifle in his hands was steady and pointed directly at Caldwell. "I reckon the lady made herself clear," the stranger said, his voice deep and steady. "Let go of her and step back." The gunman hesitated, looking to Caldwell for direction. The mining magnate's face had turned an ugly shade of purple. "This doesn't concern you, stranger," Caldwell called out. "Ride on and forget what you saw." The cowboy chambered another round with a decisive click. "I put the next one between your eyes, Caldwell. I won't ask again." Something in his tone convinced the men he meant business. The gunman slowly released Sarah, who clutched Emma tightly to her chest, soothing her cries. Caldwell's eyes narrowed as he studied the newcomer. "Do you have any idea who I am? A man about to take a dirt nap if he doesn't back away," the cowboy replied evenly. "Your reputation precedes you, Howard Caldwell, so does your habit of stealing what isn't yours." Sarah watched with disbelief as Caldwell and his men slowly retreated, mounting their horses with muttered threats. "This isn't over," Caldwell called back as they rode away. "That land will be mine one way or another." Only when they had disappeared from sight did the cowboy lower his rifle and approach Sarah. As he came closer, she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with piercing blue eyes and a day's worth of stubble on his jaw. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, dismounting and approaching cautiously. Sarah shook her head, still trembling. "No, thanks to you, I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks," he replied, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. "Name's Daniel Blackett. Most folks call me Dan." "Sarah Vance," she replied, shifting Emma to her shoulder. "And this is Emma." Daniel nodded toward the baby with a small smile. "She's a fine little lady, got her mother's spirit, I'd wager." Sarah managed a shaky laugh, more like her father's stubbornness. Her smile faltered as grief washed over her again. "Your horse is done in," Daniel observed, glancing at Pearl. "My place isn't far from here. You're welcome to rest there until she recovers." Sarah hesitated, studying this stranger who had come to her rescue. In the wild territory of Wyoming, trusting too easily could be dangerous, but something about Daniel Blackett's steady gaze reassured her. Besides, she had few options with Caldwell's men likely to return. "I'd appreciate that," she said finally. "We don't have anywhere else to go right now." Daniel nodded, leading his stallion over to them. "Thunder here can carry us both. I'll come back for your mare once you're settled." With Emma securely in her arms, Sarah allowed Daniel to help her onto his horse before he swung up behind her. The closeness felt strange after months of being alone, but also comforting in a way she hadn't expected. As they rode away from the trees, Sarah looked back once at the place where everything had changed again. "Caldwell won't give up easily," she said quietly. "No," Daniel agreed, his voice just above her ear. "But neither will we. We." Such a simple word, yet it had been so long since Sarah had been part of a we that wasn't just her and Emma. She wasn't sure what to make of this cowboy who had inserted himself into her troubles, but for now, she was simply grateful not to face them alone. Daniel's ranch was modest but well kept, nestled in a small valley with mountains rising in the distance. A sturdy log cabin stood near a barn and corral with a stream running nearby. As they approached, Sarah could see a small garden plot and a few head of cattle grazing on the hillside. "It's not much," Daniel said as he helped her down from Thunder. "But it's quiet and Caldwell doesn't venture this way much." "It's lovely," Sarah replied honestly. After the fear and chaos of the morning, the peaceful homestead was a welcome sight. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a kitchen area to one side and a living space to the other. A narrow staircase led to what Sarah presumed was a loft bedroom. "Make yourself at home," Daniel said, looking slightly uncomfortable now that they were in his space. "I'll fetch your horse and be back before sundown." After he left, Sarah took the opportunity to tend to Emma, feeding her and changing her before settling into a rocking chair near the fireplace. The events of the day had left her exhausted, and she must have dozed off because she woke with a start to the sound of the door opening. Daniel entered, carrying her saddlebags. "Your mare's resting in the barn," he said. "She'll be fine after some water and feed." "Thank you," Sarah said, shifting the sleeping Emma in her arms, "for everything." Daniel nodded, moving to the kitchen area where he began to prepare a simple meal. "How long has Caldwell been after your land?" he asked as he worked. Sarah sighed. "Since before Thomas, my husband, died. But they've become more aggressive since the funeral. Thomas always said there might be silver on our claim, but we were more interested in farming than mining." "That sounds like Caldwell," Daniel replied, his jaw tightening. "He's bought up half the county already. Most folks can't refuse his offers or his threats." "You seem to know him well," Sarah observed. Daniel was quiet for a moment, focusing on slicing potatoes. "Let's just say we have history. He doesn't recognize me now, but I know him all too well." The bitterness in his voice suggested a deeper story, but Sarah didn't press. Everyone in the West had a past they didn't speak of. She had her own secrets, after all. Over a simple dinner of fried potatoes and salt pork, Sarah learned that Daniel had been on the ranch for 5 years, having won it in a poker game from a man eager to head to California. Before that, he'd been a drifter, working as a ranch hand throughout the territories. "What about you?" he asked. "How did you end up with a homestead in Caldwell's crosshairs?" Sarah bounced Emma gently on her knee as she spoke. "Thomas and I came west 3 years ago. He had dreams of building something of our own, away from his family in Boston. We filed our claim and started building a life." She smiled sadly. "Emma was born last winter. Thomas was so proud. And the fever took him," Daniel finished quietly. Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. 3 weeks ago, I barely had time to grieve before Caldwell's men came with their first offer, and you turned them down." "The land was Thomas's dream," she said simply. "Selling it would be like losing him all over again." Daniel's eyes softened with understanding. "You're a brave woman, Mrs. Vance." "Sarah, please," she corrected. "And I'm not brave, just stubborn, according to Thomas." "Stubbornness is a valuable trait out here," Daniel said with a small smile. "It's what keeps folks alive." That night, Daniel insisted Sarah take the loft bedroom while he slept on a bedroll near the fireplace. As she lay in the unfamiliar bed with Emma beside her, Sarah stared at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Caldwell wouldn't give up easily, and she couldn't hide at Daniel's ranch forever. Eventually, she would have to face him again, but perhaps not alone this time. Morning brought the smell of coffee and the sound of Daniel moving quietly around the kitchen. Sarah came downstairs with Emma to find breakfast waiting: biscuits, bacon, and eggs from the chickens she'd spotted outside. "You cook better than I do," she commented, settling Emma in her lap. Daniel shrugged. "Years of bachelor living, you learn or you starve." After breakfast, Daniel suggested they ride to Sarah's homestead to assess the situation. "Caldwell's men might be watching the place," he warned, "but we need to know what we're dealing with." Sarah agreed, though the thought of returning made her nervous. With Emma secured in a sling across her chest and Pearl recovered from her exhaustion, they set out mid-morning. Daniel rode beside her, rifle across his saddle, scanning the horizon constantly. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked as they crossed a shallow stream. The question had been on her mind since yesterday. Daniel was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I've seen what happens when Caldwell gets his way. Too many good people forced off their land, or worse." "There's more to it than that," Sarah observed. "This feels personal." Daniel's eyes hardened. 7 years ago, my brother and I had a small claim north of here, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Caldwell wanted it. When we refused to sell, his men came at night." He paused, his knuckles white on the reins. "The cabin caught fire, I got out, my brother didn't." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I was young, foolish, tried to take on Caldwell legally," he continued, "but he owns the judges and the sheriff. I was run out of the county with nothing but the clothes on my back and my brother in a pine box." "And now you're back," Sarah said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Took me years to build up enough to return. I've been waiting for the right moment to make Caldwell pay. Then I saw you yesterday with your baby and—" He trailed off, his gaze distant. Some things don't change. Caldwell's still taking what isn't his. The revelation gave Sarah a new understanding of her rescuer. His help wasn't merely kindness, it was justice delayed, a chance to right an old wrong. She wasn't sure how to feel about being part of his vendetta, but she understood the need to stand against men like Caldwell. They crested a hill, and Sarah's homestead came into view in the valley below. The small cabin and barn stood as she'd left them, but even from a distance, she could see that something was wrong. Dark patches marred the golden fields surrounding the structures. "They've salted your fields," Daniel said grimly as they drew closer, "making sure you can't farm even if you stay." Tears stung Sarah's eyes as she surveyed the damage. Thomas had worked those fields from sunrise to sunset, breaking the sod and planting their first crops. Now the earth was poisoned, unusable for years to come. Inside the cabin, things were worse. Furniture had been overturned, Thomas's books torn and scattered. The small portrait of their wedding day lay shattered on the floor, the glass cracked across Sarah's smiling face. "They're sending a message," Daniel said, his voice tight with anger as he examined the destruction. "Making sure you know they can reach you anywhere." Sarah stood in the middle of the chaos, Emma whimpering against her chest. "What am I supposed to do? They've taken everything." "Not everything," Daniel replied, kneeling to pick up a leather-bound Bible that had survived the destruction. "You still have your claim, you still have your daughter, and now you have me." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Sarah studied his face, seeing the determination there, the anger on her behalf. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" she asked softly. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Daniel answered. "I know you're fighting for your child's future. I know you loved your husband enough to honor his dream even when it would be easier to walk away." He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "And I know that sometimes a person gets a second chance to do what's right. This is mine." The conviction in his voice stirred something in Sarah, something she'd thought had died with Thomas. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just the realization that she wasn't truly alone in her fight. They gathered what they could salvage: clothes, some cooking utensils, the deed to the property that Sarah had hidden beneath a loose floorboard. As they were loading the items onto their horses, the sound of approaching riders made them both tense. "Into the trees," Daniel ordered, helping Sarah mount quickly. Now, they barely made it to the cover of a nearby grove when 5 riders appeared, Caldwell's men, armed and looking for trouble. From their hiding place, Sarah and Daniel watched as the men circled the cabin, one dismounting to kick at the door. "She's been back," the man called to his companions. "Tracks are fresh, spread out," another ordered. "Check the barn and the creek, she can't have gone far." Daniel's hand found Sarah's in the shadows, squeezing gently. "We'll wait until they move on, then circle around behind them," he whispered. "The old mining trail leads back to my place through the hills." Sarah nodded, trying to control her breathing and keep Emma quiet. The baby, seeming to sense the danger, remained remarkably still, her big eyes watching the dappled light through the leaves. For an hour, they remained hidden as Caldwell's men searched the property. Eventually, frustrated by their lack of success, the riders departed, heading back toward town with promises to return. "We need a plan," Sarah said as they made their way carefully through the hills. "I can't keep running, and I can't put you in danger indefinitely." "I've been thinking about that," Daniel replied, leading the way along a narrow trail. "Caldwell's power comes from his connections and his money, but he has weaknesses. Such as, he's been skirting the edge of the law for years, intimidation, fraud, even murder like in my brother's case. But he's careful, never leaves evidence that would stand in court." Sarah frowned. "Then how does that help us?" "Because," Daniel said, glancing back at her with a determined expression, "I've spent 5 years gathering information. Names, dates, transactions. Caldwell doesn't know it, but 3 of his former men work for me now. Men who were tired of doing his dirty work and agreed to talk. You've been building a case against him," Sarah realized. Daniel nodded. "I have enough to interest the federal marshal in Cheyenne. What I didn't have was someone willing to stand with me in court, someone Caldwell had wronged recently with evidence to support their claims. "Someone like me," Sarah said quietly. "The attack on you and your baby changes things," Daniel explained. Threatening a widow is one thing, attempting to steal her child is another level entirely. Even Caldwell's paid judges would have trouble ignoring that. They reached Daniel's ranch as the sun was setting, the mountains turning purple against the darkening sky. After settling the horses and seeing to Emma, they sat at Daniel's kitchen table, papers spread before them. "These are statements from former Caldwell employees," Daniel explained, pointing to several sworn affidavits. "This one details how they drove the Jensen family off their land 3 years ago by poisoning their well. This one confirms that Judge Patterson receives regular payments from Caldwell Mining." Sarah studied the documents with growing amazement. "You've been planning this for years." "Justice takes patience," Daniel replied. "I wanted to be certain when I moved against him. One mistake and Caldwell would make sure I disappeared." "And now," Sarah asked, "now we take this to Marshal Fleming in Cheyenne. Your testimony about the attack combined with these documents should be enough for him to act." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding what this would mean. "It won't be easy. Caldwell will fight back with everything he has." "He will," Daniel agreed. "Which is why we leave at first light before his men can find us here." That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah found herself unable to rest. The events of the past days kept playing through her mind: the attack, Daniel's timely rescue, the discovery of her ransacked home. And now this plan to take on one of the most powerful men in the territory. She went downstairs to find Daniel still awake, sitting by the dying embers of the fire, cleaning his rifle. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Too much on my mind," she admitted, settling into the chair across from him. "I keep thinking about Thomas, about what he would want me to do." Daniel set the rifle aside, his eyes finding hers in the dim light. "What do you think he'd say?" Sarah smiled sadly. "He'd tell me to fight." Thomas never backed down from what he believed was right, even when it cost him. She twisted her wedding ring absently, "But he'd also want me to protect Emma above all else." "We can do both," Daniel assured her. "I promise you, Sarah, I won't let anything happen to either of you." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. In the short time she'd known him, Daniel Blackett had shown himself to be a man of honor, someone who understood loss and injustice as intimately as she did. "Why didn't you ever marry?" she asked suddenly, curious about the man who had upended her life so completely. Daniel looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. "After my brother died, I was consumed by grief, by anger, by the need for justice. Didn't leave room for much else." He paused, adding softly, "And I guess I never met the right woman, someone worth staying in one place for." The way he looked at her as he said it made Sarah's heart beat a little faster. She told herself it was just gratitude she was feeling, combined with the intimacy of the firelight and shared confidences. It was too soon after Thomas for anything else. "We should try to rest," she said, standing abruptly. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Daniel nodded, his eyes still on her face. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night," she replied, hurrying back up the stairs to the loft where Emma slept peacefully, unaware of the dangers and complexities of the adult world. Morning came with a sense of urgency. They packed quickly, loading only what they needed for the journey to Cheyenne. Daniel insisted on bringing all his documentation, secured in a leather satchel that he strapped to his saddle. "If we ride hard, we can make it to the railroad at Fort Steele by nightfall," he explained as they prepared to leave. "From there, it's half a day to Cheyenne by train." As they mounted up, Sarah looked back at the small ranch that had provided unexpected sanctuary. "Will you come back here after, when it's over?" Daniel shrugged. "Never thought much beyond bringing Caldwell to justice. Guess I'll decide when the time comes." They had just crested the first hill when Daniel suddenly reined in, his posture alert. Sarah followed his gaze to see dust rising in the distance, riders moving fast toward the ranch. "Caldwell's men," Daniel said grimly. "Someone must have talked. We need to move now." They spurred their horses into a gallop, taking a game trail that led deeper into the hills. Sarah held Emma tightly against her, praying the baby would endure the rough ride. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. There's an old line shack ahead, Daniel called over the thunder of hooves. We can make a stand there if needed. The small cabin appeared as they rounded a bend, nestled against a rocky outcropping. Daniel dismounted quickly, helping Sarah down before leading the horses behind the structure. "Get inside," he ordered, unslinging his rifle. "Stay low and keep Emma quiet." Sarah hurried into the dusty cabin, which consisted of a single room with a small fireplace and a narrow cot. She settled on the floor beside the single window, Emma clutched to her chest. Outside, she could hear Daniel moving, preparing for the confrontation. The riders approached slowly, having spotted the fresh tracks leading to the shack. Sarah counted 6 men, Caldwell himself among them. They spread out, surrounding the small structure. "Blackett," Caldwell called. "I know you're in there, you and the widow." Daniel appeared at the doorway, rifle raised. "That's close enough, Caldwell." The mining magnate sat easily in his saddle, a smug smile beneath his mustache. "I finally remembered where I knew you from. You're Samuel Blackett's little brother. Thought I ran you out of Wyoming years ago." "You did," Daniel replied coldly. "I came back," Caldwell chuckled. "To what? Revenge? How's that working out for you?" He gestured to his men. "You're outnumbered. The woman's claim is worthless now that we've salted her fields. Be reasonable and perhaps we can all walk away from this. Like my brother walked away." Daniel's voice was deadly quiet. "Or the Jensens, or the dozen other families you've destroyed. Business is business," Caldwell replied with a shrug. "Nothing personal. But harboring the widow and her brat that you've made personal." From her position by the window, Sarah could see Daniel's shoulders tense. "The woman and her child are under my protection. You want them, you come through me." "Have it your way," Caldwell said, signaling to his men. "Burn them out." One of the riders produced a flaming torch, clearly prepared for this possibility. Sarah gasped as he urged his horse forward, preparing to throw it onto the cabin's dry wood roof. The crack of Daniel's rifle split the air, and the torch-bearer fell from his saddle with a cry, clutching his shoulder. The torch fell harmlessly to the ground, its flame quickly extinguished in the dirt. "Next one goes between the eyes," Daniel warned, chambering another round. "Starting with you, Caldwell." The mining magnate's face twisted with fury. "Kill him," he ordered his remaining men. What followed was chaos. Gunfire erupted from all sides, bullets splintering the cabin's walls. Daniel returned fire methodically, dropping one man then another. Sarah pressed herself flat on the floor, shielding Emma with her body as wood chips and dust rained down from the impacts. A bullet shattered the window above her, showering her with glass. Emma began to wail in terror, her cries adding to the cacophony of gunfire and shouts. "Sarah." Daniel called from his position by the door. "Are you hit?" "We're all right," she called back, her voice shaking. "Daniel, we're trapped in here, I know," he replied grimly. "I count 3 still standing, including Caldwell." Outside, the gunfire paused. "You're out of options, Blackett," Caldwell shouted. "Throw out your gun and the deed to the Vance property, and maybe the woman and child can live." Daniel glanced back at Sarah, his eyes meeting hers across the small cabin. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a decision. "I have a better offer," Daniel called back. "I have sworn statements from 3 of your former employees, details of your land grabs, the bribes to Judge Patterson, and the fire that killed my brother. It's all written down, signed and notarized." There was a long silence from outside. When Caldwell spoke again, his voice had lost some of its confidence. "You're bluffing." "The papers are in my saddlebag," Daniel replied. "Walk away now, Caldwell. Take your wounded and go, or those documents find their way to the federal marshal in Cheyenne." Another silence, longer this time. Sarah could almost feel Caldwell weighing his options, calculating the risk. "This isn't over, Blackett," Caldwell finally called. "The woman's land is worthless now anyway, not worth dying over." "That's where you're wrong," Daniel replied. "Some things are worth any price." They listened as horses moved away, the sound of retreat growing fainter. Daniel remained vigilant at the door for long minutes after, making sure it wasn't a trick. Finally, he turned to Sarah, his face grim but relieved. "Are you truly unharmed?" he asked, crossing to kneel beside her. Sarah nodded, still cradling the crying Emma. "Just scared, you." Daniel winced slightly, and Sarah noticed for the first time the dark stain spreading across his left sleeve. Caught one in the arm, nothing serious. Let me see, she insisted, setting Emma down on the cot. The wound was a clean graze, painful but not life-threatening. Using strips torn from her petticoat, Sarah bandaged his arm, working with the efficiency of a woman accustomed to frontier injuries. "Thank you," Daniel said when she had finished. He caught her hand as she was withdrawing it, holding it gently in his own. "Sarah, I didn't expect any of this when I rode into those trees yesterday." "Nor did I," she admitted, "but I'm grateful for all of it." "Caldwell's right about one thing," Daniel said hesitantly. "Your fields are ruined. It will be years before that land can grow anything again." Sarah sighed, the reality of her situation settling in. "I know, but it's still our home, mine and Emma's." "It could be," Daniel agreed. Or, Sarah prompted when he hesitated, "or you could consider another option." Daniel's eyes held her steadily. "My ranch has good water, fertile soil, plenty of room for a garden, for livestock, for a family." Sarah's breath caught at the implication of his words. "Daniel, we barely know each other." "I know you're the bravest woman I've ever met," he replied simply. "I know watching you with your daughter makes me want things I thought I'd given up on. And I know that life out here is too short and too hard to waste time when you find something worth holding on to." He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not asking for promises. Just a chance. Stay at the ranch while we sort out Caldwell, see if what I'm feeling, if maybe you might feel it too in time." Sarah looked at this man who had risked his life for her and Emma, who understood loss as she did, who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. Thomas would always be in her heart, but perhaps there was room for something new to grow alongside that love, like wildflowers returning after a prairie fire. "Yes," she said softly, "we'll stay." 6 months later, Sarah stood on the porch of Daniel's ranch house, their ranch house, now watching as he showed Emma how to pet the new foal in the corral. The baby girl, now a year old, squealed with delight as the gangly creature nuzzled her small hand. The journey to Cheyenne had led to Caldwell's arrest on multiple charges of fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy. With the mining magnate awaiting trial and his empire crumbling, many of the families he had driven away were returning to reclaim their lands. Sarah had sold her poisoned homestead to the railroad, using the money to invest in their shared future. Daniel's ranch was thriving under their combined efforts, the garden expanded, a new chicken coop built, and plans for a larger house underway. As she watched the man and child who had become the center of her world, Sarah felt a contentment she had never expected to find again. Their courtship had been unconventional danger and shared purpose gradually giving way to deeper feelings, to stolen kisses and long conversations by firelight, to the gentle healing of two wounded hearts finding each other. Last week, under a harvest moon, Daniel had placed his mother's ring on her finger, and they had spoken vows before a traveling preacher. Simple, honest words promising a life built together day by day. Daniel looked up, catching her watching them. His smile, once so rare, came easily now. He whispered something to Emma, who turned to wave excitedly at her mother. "Mama," the little girl called. "Horse?" "I see, sweetheart," Sarah called back, descending the porch steps to join them. Daniel's arms slipped around her waist as she reached them, pulling her close. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Sarah leaned into his embrace, watching as Emma fearlessly patted the foal's soft nose. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. The Wyoming sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, a lonesome sound that echoed across the valley. But here, in this moment, there was no loneliness, only the promise of tomorrow, and all the days that would follow, building a life neither of them had dared to dream of when a desperate chase had brought them together. "They can't take this from us," Sarah said softly, her hand finding Daniel's. "No one can." "No," Daniel agreed, his eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "What we've built is ours, now and always." As darkness settled over the ranch, they walked together toward the warm light of home, their shadows merging into one against the golden glow of the lantern in the window.